We're convening the Monday, April 18th meeting of the Charlotte City Council's Intergovernmental Relations Committee. We have a pretty straightforward agenda, and we'll try to get through it quick, as again it is a rezoning night and we should have a long night ahead of us. We'll do introductions in the room, then virtual, and then we'll turn it over to Brent Cagle for agenda overview. And Mr. Fenton will carry on the meeting from then. My name is Braxton Winston. I'm co-chair of the committee.
Dana Fenton with the City Manager's Office.
Brent Cagle, Assistant City Manager.
Denia Jackson, Office of Constituent Services.
We'll go with our council members, then staff, then visitors online.
Tarek Bakari, co-chair.
Ed Driggs, committee member.
Nelson Freeman, KTS Strategies.
John Easterling, KTS Strategies.
I think that's it. So, Mr. Cagle, it's all yours.
Yeah, just briefly on the agenda overview, we will have Mr. Fenton provide us a federal update, a state update as well. Then there are two items, one for Mr. Winston and Mr. Bakari on functional consolidation, and the second is a review of discussions with the county IGR chairman, IGR committee chairman, again for Mr. Winston and Mr. Bakari. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Winston, or straight to Mr. Fenton.
Thank you, Mr. Cagle. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, for the record, my name is Dana Fenton. I'm the city's Intergovernmental Relations Manager. I'm housed in the City Manager's Office. And I'd like to bring you first the federal update for this month of April. And really the big news this month, next slide please, is that the President has released his proposed federal fiscal year 2023 budget. And there's a lot of things in here that the city would be looking for, including it calls for full funding of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act of 2021. There's quite a bit of money in there, about $1.5 billion for environmental justice programs, which is turning out to be a pretty big issue for this administration. And then there's a couple of programs that Housing and Neighborhood Services depends upon. One is Community Development Block Grant, and the other is the Home Program. And there are healthy increases in both those programs called for. An increase in community policing services, community-oriented policing services, I should say, and then even increased funding for the Cure Violence Intervention Initiative. There was $50 million appropriated for this current fiscal year. That would go up to $150 million. And then there's a pretty healthy increase for institutional capacity at historically black colleges and universities. At this point, the budget is a proposal, and I think we all know that the executive proposes and the legislative branch disposes. And so over the next several months, the subcommittees in the House and Senate will be looking at this, and there will be a lot of horse trading. And I think the next thing you'll see coming out on the budget is probably in the June, July timeframe. That's usually when the House Appropriations subcommittees will make their recommendations, and then the bills might head to the floor for a vote at some point. And then, of course, we will have sometime after the August recess, September or October, is when negotiations really start getting going on the budget between the House and the Senate. And certainly the new fiscal year will start on October 1 of this year, but as we've seen in past years, it's very few times has an appropriations bill been passed before the October 1 start of the fiscal year. So we've got several months ahead of us with budgetary issues.
I have one question, I have a couple questions about that. This has to pass both the House and Senate to get through, right?
Yes, sir.
And when you're saying the full funding of the Infrastructure Investment Act, that is the infrastructure bill that was passed. I feel like last meeting, we had said that there were certain things that had to happen, but I thought you said it would be fully funded in the spring. Is that incorrect? Am I remembering that wrong?
No, you're not. You're not remembering it wrong at all. The parts of the bipartisan infrastructure law that passed last year and signed into law by the president in November, part of that bill you could term an authorization bill, that it provided the policy framework under which a program would work, but no funding was appropriated for that program. In the case of other programs, there was something called advance appropriations. And so you kind of had a mix of some programs had their funding ready to go almost immediately, and others had to wait until the regular appropriations bill was done. And so that occurred last month. That appropriations bill for fiscal year 2022 was enacted in the middle of March, around the time that we went to Washington, D.C. last month. So, and that's, and result of that, we're receiving quite a few of those notices of funding opportunities for those bipartisan law, infrastructure law programs.
So what's in this first bullet is additional funding to complete?
Oh, yes, that's right. The bipartisan infrastructure law is a 5-year program. And last month, they funded the FY 2022. And for this, it would be the FY 2023 portion of it. Next slide, please.
Mr. Driggs?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Does the budget that the president submitted actually indicate what deficit is projected from it?
Mr. Driggs, I remember seeing that information. I didn't include it in here, but I'd be glad to get that to you. I don't recall what it is offhand.
I take your point that it's a little academic because we've got a long way to go, but I'm just curious in terms of budget deficit, what the starting point is. Anyway, if you can follow up with that, I appreciate it.
Yes, sir, I will. Thank you. Next slide, please. There's also legislation that's forming. It's not, I wouldn't call it soup yet, but it is to provide additional funding for COVID-19 preparedness, whether additional vaccines, medications, and therapies in the event of another strain or an outbreak. And that same bill, there's a draft bill that's circulating out there, and it incorporates language from a bill that passed the Senate last year, the State, Local, Tribal, and Territorial Fiscal Recovery, Infrastructure, and Disaster Relief Flexibility Act. Well, that's a real mouthful, isn't it? That act provides greater flexibility for local governments to spend a portion of their local fiscal recovery funds that were approved by the American Rescue Plan last year for infrastructure and disaster relief. And right now, they show that up to 30% of your allocation can be spent on these different types of projects. So I think as time goes by, we should be getting a final bill at some point, and we'll be better able to get we'll keep this on the update for the next few months.
Is this something that a letter from us to our, if this is something that we're in favor of, to our senators could help with?
Our senators have already voted for it. It's in the House, and we think it's probably it's a pretty sure thing that something like this will pass.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next slide, please. Let's talk about the bipartisan infrastructure law here for a little bit. I've got some information to provide to you. Some of this may be old information. Some of it is probably breaking information. But the first thing, we've talked a lot over the last several months as a committee about the airfield improvement projects that aviation will be undertaking, the fourth parallel runway, the new end-around taxiways, the South Crossfield taxiway, and so forth. An update here is that the underlined portion up at the top, you all remember the airport infrastructure grant formula funding the airport's receiving this year and for the following 4 years. About $43 million per year is coming into Charlotte Douglas International Airport A portion of that funding each year will be used to help pay for the North End Around Taxiway and the South Crossfield Taxiway projects. And in addition to that, the balance of the construction costs for those two portions of the project will be covered by the remaining airport pandemic relief funds that were received going back to 2020, and some airport funds as well. Now, the other portion of the airfield improvement projects, the actual fourth parallel runway and the South End Around Taxiway, the funding for that will be sought through a letter of intent, which we've used that term quite a few times in the last couple of years with the committee and with Congress. And then there will also be, the balance of those will be covered by passenger facility charges and other local funds.
Did I hear somebody online wanted to chime in? Keep going, Mr. Fett.
Okay, thank you. Then there are three grant proposals that have been submitted in the last few weeks. The first one is by the airport to the airport terminal program. This is a competitive grant program for terminal facilities, and what they're proposing is start the phase 2 of the Concourse A expansion. And then there are two RAISE grants proposals that have been submitted. The first one is the Pearl Innovation District that the city, the county, Atrium, and several others are working on for the infrastructure cost. And the second one is a Regional Vision Zero plan that the CARTPO, the Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization, has worked on. This would be for a planning grant to look at the entirety of their service area, which includes Mecklenburg, Iredell counties, and also a good portion of Union County. Next slide, please. There are a couple of competitive grant proposals in process. One of them it's a really long title here, but it's basically to take an intersection in northeast Charlotte near the university with University City Boulevard that has a lot of congestion, and to try to straighten that out, put a grade separation in there. And also, it would also realign Back Creek Church Road, which which intersects with University City Boulevard closer to I-45, but it would come in with Mallard Creek Road, and there would be a grade separation there as well. And that's something that CDOT's working with NCDOT and UNC Charlotte on. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that it would also provide an opportunity to improve pedestrian safety in that area, which is truly needed. And then the other one that's been working on at this time is the CATS battery electric bus submission. There's a couple, they'll be submitting the proposal to the lower no emission vehicle program and the bus and bus facilities program. And both of those are due later in the month of May.
Just real quick, something I wanted to mention, Mr. Driggs, something you might want to pay attention to with these RAISE grants in the Budget Committee, the Pearl Innovation District. If we do get that, I do believe that would go to money that we had, I believe, initially thought was going to be local dollars given to infrastructure. Because this is an addition, we didn't count this, right?
This is in addition to the funding that the city and county have provided.
Yeah. Again, just Mr. Driggs, it might be something we want to look at just to understand if this changes, how this changes, what more can be done with our dollars that are going to that investment at the Pearl Innovation District. Again, just for something we can talk about offline.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we have a $2.1 million TIG that we've committed. So this would be supplemental to that, and I think we can see if we can leverage the TIG with these funds. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, next slide. Oh, yes, you're on the right slide. Thank you. There's some future opportunities that the U.S. DOT and other agencies have alerted us. They'll be coming out with their notices of funding opportunities in the months following, including the planning along rail transit corridors. We should see something in May on that. Same thing with Vision Zero. We should be seeing a second, or what we call, this is a multiple outlet for Vision Zero. You know, the Vision Zero RAISE planning grant was submitted last week through the RAISE program, and this would be another opportunity to help with Vision Zero programs around the area. And then there's a couple of grant proposals or notices of funding opportunities coming out that would help perhaps eliminate some railway at-grade crossings. As you know, a lot of times when cars get stuck on the tracks, it causes a lot of problems for everybody. Next slide, please.
With the
Yes.
transit-oriented development pilot program that is coming in May, would that have to be applied to current transit lines or potential future
Both.
transit? Okay.
Both. Yeah, I think we have received, I know we received at least one of these grants in the last couple of years for the Silver Line. We may have received a second grant. I can't recall right offhand. But yes, it would be used for either a proposed or for an existing rail line.
Duly noted. Thank you.
Next slide. Oh, yeah, this slide, the Environmental Justice Program, probably the centerpiece of the administration's program, the Reconnecting Communities Pilot Program. We should be seeing a notice of funding opportunity for that in June. And then under stormwater, there's a couple of opportunities. The first program is the Bridge Investment Program. That also helps replace culverts, which is mainly what stormwater has that would require replacement. And the same thing with the second program, the National Culvert Removal, Replacement and Restoration Program. And then in September, we should see one of the newer technology type of NOFOs coming out, the Strengthening Mobility and Revolutionizing Transportation Grant Program. This is an opportunity to demonstrate some new technologies to help traffic flow better, and quite a few other things as well, I should say. Next slide. Next steps for us. May 16th and June 20th, we have our upcoming IRC meetings. And then, as I said before, the House Appropriations Subcommittees in the U.S. Congress will start to look at reporting out their appropriation measures in June and July. And then the late spring and summer, we should be receiving feedback from federal agencies about our competitive grant proposals. And in August in particular, we're looking at that being the month when the USDOT will announce the recipients of RAISE grants for this fiscal year. So, Mr. Chairman, that's all I have for a federal update. Be glad to take any questions.
Mr. Bakari or Mr. Driggs, do you have any questions for Mr. Fenton on the federal update?
None for me.
That was good, thanks.
Thank you.
Moving on.
All right. Moving on to the state update. And this one is definitely not going to be as long as the federal update. Just to give you an indication, there's been very, very little happening at the state the last few months. And, but just to have a couple of things for you. The House and the Senate, as you all recall, they reconvened from April 4th to the 6th. True to what they said before, they didn't transact any business, and they had pro forma sessions those days. And they're coming back on May 4th to the 6th, a Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, where they really want to have the same type of session, no business to be transacted. And if anybody were to ask you, why did they even schedule when they have no business to be transacted? They just scheduled those just in case there was litigation decisions that were impacting what was going on or any other matter. I know that during these times, some committees of the General Assembly like to meet as part of their administration oversight activities. And then everybody's getting ready for the short session that convenes on May 18th. And looking right now, it's not going to last too long past mid to late June. Every year, we know they like to get out by July 4th, but it looks like this year they have, it's definitely shaping up to be a very short session. Next slide, please. And also, let's talk about a little bit about the bipartisan infrastructure law programs that the state is administering. And these are things that we're looking at. Hopefully, we'll see some things coming out about these over the next few months. There's a national electric vehicle charging formula program where the states will receive funding directly from the federal government. It's going to be formula funding. And the states will use this funding to locate EV charging stations around the state. And certainly there's an opportunity for us, maybe not to receive the funding, but to work with the state in choosing locations for these charging stations. But there are some opportunities for funding to come to the city. One is the area of digital inclusion. There's a couple of grant programs that the federal government has decided that the states would administer. And those funds will flow through the state, in particular the Department of Information Technology. And the same thing with cybersecurity. There is a state and local cybersecurity grant program that the state will be administering, and that'll be competitive grants, and all of that, again, will be coming through the state. And that's the same department, the Department of Infrastructure. I'm sorry, it's the Department of Innovation and Technology, I believe. I know you talked with some of the people there, Mr. Winston, thank you. And then also, in the area of clean water, drinking water and so forth, the Department of Environmental Quality will be administering the loan programs that are available to water, wastewater, and stormwater utilities, especially in the areas they're called clean water or drinking water state revolving loans. And also those loans were broadened to address issues like lead removal and the forever chemicals that we call PFAS. So there's quite a bit of new funding allocated this year to each of the states. Next slide. Next steps for us, next week, next Thursday from 12 noon to 1, we have the state delegation briefing. That will be virtual, of course. And then we have the next IRC meeting. We have the short session start. One day I just want to make sure you all know about, I know this is pretty difficult to get these scheduled in with our own schedule, but it's going to be the League of Municipalities City-State Dinner that's been held a few times over the last several years. I don't recall this being held last year or in 2020, but I do remember it being held in 2019 and 2018. And this is a relatively new thing for the league, and I thought that the first two that were held, that there was really good attendance from members of the General Assembly. And again, we're projecting the General Assembly will be out by the end of June. And with that, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation. I'd be glad to take any questions.
Mr. Driggs, Mr. Bakari, any questions?
I just had one, Mr. Chair. Can we get any of that money for computer security as part of our systems, our proposed systems conversion?
Mr. Drake, are you referring to the cybersecurity funding?
Yes.
I'm not sure what exactly would be covered by that grant program. I'd be glad to take a look at it. But I don't recall right offhand just what would actually be covered for that, whether it would be just how far it goes from just addressing cybersecurity. But I'd be glad to check that out for you.
Mr. Driggs, this is Brent Cagle. We can provide you with more information. I know that Renee Askew, our Chief Information Officer, is looking at opportunities for the city to apply for these grants. I don't know if it's specific to ERP, I think is what you were referring to, but certainly they are looking at how we can apply for and utilize some of these grant opportunities.
We better get Mr. Bakari to work on that. He can make anything happen, right, Todd?
Heard that, Mr. Bakari? You got a charge, man.
It has to be money.
You got it. Done. It's already done.
Good, thanks.
I have no questions, so if Mr. Bakari doesn't have any questions,
Nope.
thank you very much, Mr. Fenton. So I'll take these, we'll deal with item 5 and 6 together. It'll just be a quick update. We took the committee charge, and we have had conversations with Commissioner Jarrell, and he is planning on inviting us to the May, with the May IGR committee of the County Commission Ms. Bakari and I are just going to get him a short communication in the next couple days, just to, button everything up. And, we're really no report besides that. But we're moving along as the committee recommended us to do.
And Mr. Chair, could you just keep us advised as you identify like topics, areas for possible cooperation with them so that we are completely in step?
Oh, absolutely. So after, I assume they will generate an agenda for the committee meeting in May that we will attend. And so as soon as we have that, we will share that with the committee as a whole.
And at this point, the chairman of the Board of County Commissioners is kind of in the know and on board, right?
Yes, and just to clarify, the way the county commission, what I've learned, the county commission very much utilizes their committee structure. And so they don't even like to take positions on whether or not they're open to anything to even, as Mr. Bakari said, to try to get to the starting line. They don't get to the starting line until a committee tells them to or not. So that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, the way I describe it is we are still moving forward after a bit of our own fabricated drama on our side as we started all of this. Now just trying to kind of rebuild the communication lines that were established, that Braxton had done a really good job before, and really getting ourselves that at bat. So we're in no danger of tackling any issues and settling on any of them right now, but we are making very good progress under Braxton's leadership in this, building the bridges between the groups, trying to get ourselves that at bat to have the conversations. And obviously, we will have full updates when that moment seems to be arriving.
So the budget.
I'm impressed with where you are in this environment, so keep it up. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, that's all I have for 5 and 6. Mr. Bakari, Mr. Driggs, you have anything for the good of the order?
Don't mention the short session. Let's go.
All right.
No,
Well, with that, motion to close. Second.
Second.
Aye. Thank you. See y'all in a few.